He came up to her like a penitential monk approaching his superior for punishment. The madwoman shrunk away from him at first, trying to free her arms from those of Cordelia, who was holding her tight, as if afraid she would do something violent. But Mr. Evans, who kept on mumbling in Welsh, set her free from Cordelia's hold, and as soon as she felt herself free, she stopped shrinking away from him. It's not, whispered Mr. Evans to Mad Bet, so that no one heard him but Mr. Wallop and Cordelia. It's my devil who does it, but I am going to drive him out on Midsummer Day. You shall see. You shall be there. You shall see him driven out. He will never. Once more he began mumbling something hurriedly in Welsh. Then Mad Bet did a very queer thing. She snatched off her black hat from her bald head and, stretching out her arms, seized Mr. Evans around the neck and drew his head down towards her own. No one but Cordelia and Mr. Wallop saw what happened. But Mr. Wallop's eyes opened as wide as Bert Cole's would have done when he beheld Mr. Evans's great Roman nose pressing against that horrible white rondure, and his twisted mouth kissing it. "The Grail messenger!" thought Mr. Evans as he straightened his back and helped Mad Bet to straighten her hat and replace it on her head. "Toosie!" It was the voice of Mother Legge, who had hardly entered the room than she was once more standing at the window. "Towsy? Go to the front door. There's someone coming." There had been a general movement, meanwhile, towards the group that surrounded Mad Bet. Something in the human mind leaps up with rapturous release when some outrageous event is occurring. Most men live but a half-life, dull, tame, monotonous. The occurrence of something that is outrageously startling, upsetting to all proprieties, to all conventions, stirs such people with a primordial satisfaction. The submerged Cro-Magnon in them, or at least the submerged Neolithic man, swims up in them like a rising diver from the bottom of the atavistic sea, and they rush forward, or steal forward, towards the spot where the forbidden thing is occurring. Once more, as John watched the broad back of his hostess, he watched it, not washed it, of his hostess standing at the window, while her plump hands, each of which had a wedding ring upon it, she held the black and white curtains apart. He got the feeling that she was protecting a nursery of naughty children from some monstrous invasion, from some unearthly questing beast, whose featureless face, made of decomposing stuff of darkness, was even now pressing against the window. "It is a wet night," remarked Mr. Wallop to Cordelia. But Cordelia was desperately trying to remember what it was when she was along on Trellis Hill before the rain caught her by the giant oaks that had made her feel so strong to deal with Mr. Evans. But as she watched him now, seated at the mahogany table, with an immobile face, like the very face upon that biblical penny that made Christ utter the words, "Render under Caesar," she began to question whether it were in her power to help him. "He has got something serious on his conscience," she thought. "Or he has got some mania that I can't understand. Why did he do that to Betsy just now? It was horrible to see him." "Yes," she responded aloud to Mr. Wallop's mild remark. "But it's because people aren't talking so loud that we hear it now. Everyone seems whispering as if something was going to happen. I hope that miserable woman isn't going to die." She kicked off her nice rug, remarked the ex-mayor reproachfully. "Yes," Dave Spear replied to a question of Barter, who had just appeared at the mahogany table to refill Clarissa's glass from Miss Campbell's silver bowl. "Yes, my wife and I have received word from Bristol that we'd better stay till June, at any rate, if we can't get them to strike till then." Mr. Barter felt one of the most grieving pangs of self-reproach that he had ever known when he heard this calm declaration. What a Judas to Philip he had been. Oh, he should never have let these contemptible Somersetshire workmen get so out of hand. What would he do without him? And what was he doing? Making toys, while a real industry like those dye works was being threatened. Aye, he would like to be flying through this wild rain now, with his fingers on the control, heading for Glastonbury from Wookiee, through the liquid darkness. Bah! What jumpy idiots these Glastonbury fools were. What the devil? I can't bear it, oh my God! Titty's voice was hardly the voice of a human being. The iron ball with the spike had changed shape. Young Toozy's voice rang out so quickly after the woman's cry as to see a portion of the same litany of chaos. His worship, the mayor, madame! Mr. Gurd did not stop to take off his dripping overcoat. He pushed Mrs. Legg aside as if she had been a feather's weight. Everyone stared at him now as shamelessly as did the predecessor in office. The very recorders on the wall seemed staring at him. And well, they might be. A heavily built man in his dripping clothes was now pushing his way through them, bent double, and with his hands pressed against his great belly. Oh my God, he was groaning out as he stumbled forward. The man's whole body seemed undergoing some sort of convulsion. Blindly he stumbled against the mahogany table. The silver bowl seemed to catch his attention. He caught it up as he passed. Mr. Barter, who had just dipped Clarice's glass in it, drew back hurriedly, spilling the liqueur he held. Let this cup, howled Mr. Gurd in a tone that made even Mr. Wallop shiver, for it seemed more like the bark of a great Sedgemoor fox than the voice of a man. And even as he cried, he flung the thing with all his force upon the ground, flung it just as Crummie's feet, who was running, laughing and weeping, in mild hysterics towards him. When he reached Titty, whose voice had now sunk again into moans, he snatched her up in his arms, as a fireman in a whirl of flame might seize a burning woman, sank down in the chair with her on his lap, and began in his own natural voice that familiar refrain which had won him his nickname. Blood of Christ deliver us! Blood of Christ save us! Blood of Christ have mercy upon us! His voice got lower and lower as he went on. Then it fell into complete silence. Still he continued hugging the figure in his arms and slowly rocking himself and her, backward and forward, backward and forward. There was such a dead silence in the room, all the while, that the voices in the other rooms became like the intrusion of revelers at an execution or at a childbirth. Then there came a grotesque and even rather an unpleasant sound. It was the stertorous breathing of the sleeping woman. Well, that's the end of the chapter, The Silver Bowl. It's a good chapter. Just looking it over. And now we begin the next chapter, one close to my heart, Mayday. I'm not going to tell you why, though. That's right, I'm online. I have to be anonymous. Maybe you can figure it out. It was the 1st of May, and through the open kitchen window of Elizabeth Crow's little house on Benefit Street floated delicious sun-warmed airs. The house looked to the north, across the outskirts of Paradise. There was a small oblong patch of ground outside, with a rough wooden fence around it, identical with all the other back gardens of that street. And in the case of most of the others, this patch of earth was devoted rather to vegetables than to flowers. Beyond the garden was a triangular field where one of Miss Crow's neighbors kept a couple of cows. But beyond this, except for the roofs of a few scattered Paradise hovels, the water meadows stretched clear away towards the site of the Lake Village and Phillips Landing Field and Number One's backware hut. On the stove in this kitchen stood a saucepan of boiling potatoes and a large black pot full of some sort of savory stew. In the center of the kitchen was a bare deal table, the well-scrubbed top of which had assumed, so soft and friendly did it look, the whiteness of a pail of rich cream. On this table was a huge glass bowl filled with an immense, tightly packed mass of bluebells. The gorgeous blueness, a deep Prussian blue mingled with blotches of purplish color, rose up like a thickly packed cloud of almost opaque essence out of this bowl of heavy, drooping blooms and expanded till its richness of tint attracted towards it and seemed utterly to absorb all other colored things in the room. It dominated the gleam of the shining pots and pans of that small kitchen as completely as its fragrance overpowered the smell of the cooking. An empty basket with a few torn blossoms, a few long, pallid leaf spears, and a few sap-oozing stalks stood on the dresser, indicating that the flowers had been brought here that very morning. They had indeed been picked by Jackie and his little band in Wickwood, and one could see that they were all at their heavy height of blooming. It would not last much longer. The children had found 2 or 3 early pink campions on the way to Wickwood and the leafy banks of Maidencroft Lane, and these were now protruding like carmine flags in a purple sea from the midst of the rest. These bluebells must have been the direct descendants of flowers that had been the background of many a druidic May Day ritual around those great oaks. They brought with them in their oozy stalks and in their drooping heads the fleeting of 1,000 springs of English history. They brought, too, the sense of masses of hazel branches darkly clustering around these blue spaces in the deep wood and hiding the fluttering chaffinches and backcaps whose song issued forth from their entanglement. Nor had this great bunch lost the imprint of children's fingers that country people recognize so quickly. The socks plucked off so short under the flower heads and the blossoms pressed so tightly together. In addition to these flowers, there were 2 girls in Miss Crow's kitchen. The May Day feeling in the air, the warm sunshine, the presence of such a quantity of flowers at their full height of blossom, gave to the high spirits of the girls, as they chatted volubly together, that delicious quality of young feminine life which is so fleeting and so easily destroyed. The presence of a man destroys it in a second, introducing a different element altogether. Totally unconscious of what is happening to their young late bodies and souls, girls, when they are thus alone together, give themselves up to all manner of little gestures, movements, abandonments, which not only the presence of a man, but the presence of an older woman would drive away. Certain flimsy and delicate essences in young girls' beings come to the surface only when they are alone, like this, with one another. When any of them is alone by herself, it is different again, for then her own thoughts are apt to play the part of intruder and cause these fragile petals of her identity to draw in and close up. The 2 girls I am now speaking of were seated at the table of straw-buttoned chairs. They were Sally Jones and Tossie Stickles, the plump form of the latter enveloped in a capacious white apron, while the former wore a gay spring hat and a bright scarf around her warm young neck. The girls were sipping hot cocoa from big steaming cups, and as they chatted, across the mass of bluebells the clock in St. Barnabas' church struck the hour of noon. And we'll stop now before they begin their conversation, because that might be a little disorienting next time. I have to think about next time. And I'll see you next time on Glastonbury. Cheers for now. Good night.